grandfather's Holocaust survival story with thousands of middle and high school students across Poway Unified School District and in San Diego County as well, to build tolerance, inclusion, and understanding among young people. She was recently awarded a leadership award from the Jewish Community Foundation for Excellence in Community Service and Leadership. Talia, thank you for coming and sharing your presentation with us.
So hi, my name is Talia Schauder. I'm 17 years old and I'm a senior at Poway High School. I play the flute, I love to take pictures, and spend time with my friends and family. Over the past 15 months, I've gone largely to middle and high schools to share my grandfather's Holocaust survival story. And to date, I have reached about 4,500 people. I've spoken within San Diego County and even internationally. I especially want to thank Mr. Nash, my principal, for all of his support for my presentations. I tailor each presentation to my audience, including programs that schools are using, such as the No Place for Hate program, and I explain current events displaying anti-Semitism. I'm going to present to you what I normally present to my middle and high school audiences. I understand the social pressures that you experience. Today I just ask that you put yourself in someone else's shoes. Raise your hand if you've ever heard a joke about the Holocaust or other sensitive topics being made. I've had this experience at my own school, hearing my peers joke about the horrors of the Holocaust. Believe me when I say it is not funny. It is not funny to have a joke made against your culture and have to walk away crying or pretend like it doesn't hurt. Enough is enough. Let's make change together. You may have also seen headlines and posts about the anti-Semitic party that occurred this past March. Students of schools in the Orange County and Newport area gathered and created a swastika out of red Solo cups. This action of hate was self-advertised by partygoers through social media outlets such as Snapchat. A Los Angeles rabbi commented that this is an insult to the 6 million Jews who died in the Holocaust. It's also an insult to the many thousands of families in Southern California whose loved ones in the Greatest Generation fought, bled, and died to defeat the Nazis and defeat the swastika. This is a representation of how, to this day, anti-Semitic acts are still occurring. It is important to become educated so that we can overcome history and make sure that it is not repeated. Many people posted to their Instagrams acknowledging this horrific action that occurred, but spread positivity towards a better tomorrow. April 27th, in our very home of Poway, the Chabad synagogue faced a shooting. It was a Saturday morning Shabbat service, as well as being the last day of Passover. Members of the synagogue were simply exhibiting their rights as a citizen of the United States of freedom of religion when they were faced with a killer, 19 years of age, a graduate of Mount Carmel High School, who interrupted their time of prayer and opened fire. The rabbi tried to calm the shooter, and he himself was shot in the hand. There were 4 victims: one young girl who attends Chabad of Scripts for day school, her uncle who was visiting from Israel, Rabbi Goldstein, and Lori Kay, who was left in critical condition to die later that day. This hits so close to home. It is important to become educated so that we can overcome history and make sure that hate-motivated crimes are not repeated. I want to work with you to ensure the safety and acceptance of our peers, no matter one's religion, race, sexual orientation, or differences as a whole. You may have heard the motto related to Holocaust remembrance: never forget. Aside from just knowing this motto, what action are we taking to ensure that society as a whole never forgets? I believe that in order to make change for the future, we have to speak out for what is right. This brings me to my next point. Soon there aren't going to be any Holocaust survivors left. Who is going to be able to speak out for them and their memory? Think about this. There are an estimated 100,000 Holocaust survivors of camps, ghettos, and hiding under Nazi occupation left worldwide today, but they are mostly in their 80s and 90s, meaning they do not have that long left to live. Our generation must continue educating and spreading awareness. A survey was completed this past year, and it was found that an estimated 11% of U.S. adults and 22% of millennials said they either hadn't heard of or were not sure whether they had heard of the Holocaust. And 31% of adults and 41% of millennials believed incorrectly that 2 million Jews or fewer were killed during the Holocaust. To think that people are living their lives having no idea of what happened from 1938 to 1945 to the 6 million Jews and 5 million other minorities. Today I want to share with you a very personal story. My grandfather, Paul Schauder, was one of the incredible survivors of the Holocaust. I have listened firsthand to his traumatic experiences living in Nazi Germany and living through the Holocaust. Today I would like to join you to create a safer, more accepting community. The Holocaust took place from 1938 to 1945. The Holocaust was the mass killing of Jews and other minorities in Europe, such as Slavs, Russians, Spaniards, Polish people, Roma, Jehovah's Witnesses, Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, people who identified as part of the LGBTQ community, as well as those who were physically or mentally disabled, and others who did not fit the Nazi ideal. There are over 6 million Jewish victims who were slaughtered throughout the Holocaust, and up to 5 million victims who were part of the other groups that I listed. Let's back up to before the war had started in Germany. My grandpa Paul was the youngest of 3 sons. His dad's name was Marcus, and his mom was Fanny. His older brothers were named Jacob and Herman. Paul's family was very involved in Jewish life, and they were active participants in their local synagogue, Rashi Synagogue. Paul began attending school at the age of 6, and he attended a Jewish private school, as Jews were not permitted to attend public school. Before the war began, Jews were already being segregated from the others. They had fewer rights in comparison to the other Germans, even though they contributed greatly to the country. Many Jews were business owners. My grandfather's family owned a department store named Kaufhaus Schauder, where they sold furniture and other expensive goods. November 10, 1938 was a date that changed everything for the Jews in Germany and throughout Europe. This date will never be forgotten by any Jew that survived the Holocaust. This was when Kristallnacht occurred. Kristallnacht, meaning Crystal Night and known as Night of Broken Glass, refers to the smashing and destruction of Jewish homes, businesses, synagogues, and cemeteries by Nazi soldiers and supporters of Hitler. Kristallnacht was a turning point for anti-Semitism to rapidly worsen across Europe. Anti-Semitism is the hatred of Jews just for the fact that they are Jewish. Hitler and his Nazi officials were masters at brainwashing the youth of Germany into believing the Nazi ideals, which were driven by hate. For my grandpa Paul's family specifically, their department store was destroyed during Kristallnacht, leaving them no choice but to flee or face being arrested. The night that Kristallnacht occurred, Paul's father Marcus was arrested by the Gestapo, the Nazi police. My grandpa remembers this day vividly. He was the youngest and least suspicious of his family, so his mother sent him with bread to bring to his father in the jail cell. He was mocked and laughed at by the Gestapo when he asked to see his father. Finally, after much humiliation, Paul was allowed to see him. Paul spent his time in the jail cell crying and being comforted by his dad. Paul was unaware this would be the last time he would ever see his father. The image of his helpless father, sitting alone on a stool in a stark prison cell, would be forever ingrained in Paul's memory. Through this experience, Paul was forced to become a man at just 7 years old. Later, Paul and his family would learn of his father, Marcus's death in the concentration camp of Buchenwald. A concentration camp is where Jews, along with the other minority groups, were sent to die. Most of the people would meet their death there. They were starved and worked to death, sent on death marches, tortured, experimented on, and killed in gas chambers. The living quarters, as you can see, were insane. Many people shared one wooden frame of a bed, and they were sparsely clothed. Every person in the concentration camp was assigned a number that was tattooed onto their arm. This is how each person was known, more like an animal than an actual human. Upon entering the concentration camps, the Nazis took the belongings of each person, shaved their heads, among other things. Each set of belongings, such as these rings, shoes, and suitcases, representing a person's life unlived. Outside of the camps, throughout towns in Europe, all Jews were required to wear a yellow Jewish star at all times. They had to sew it into their clothes, and if caught without it, they could be arrested or sent to a concentration camp. For the next 3 months, my grandfather Paul remained in the city of Worms, Germany, with his mother and 2 brothers. His mother arranged to rent a small apartment next to a cemetery in Worms, Germany. After 3 months, his family received notice that they would have to leave the city because as Jews, they did not have the proper permits to be living in Worms. After leaving Worms, my grandpa's mother Fanny arranged for he and his brothers to stay in a Jewish orphanage in Frankfurt while she was forced to go to Berlin to work in a clinic. The boys were able to practice Judaism and celebrate the important holidays along with weekly Shabbat inside the orphanage. Even though inside the orphanage the children were able to practice Judaism, they were still well aware of the danger lurking outside. They remained in this orphanage for about 3 years until their mother arranged for them to be moved to a different Jewish orphanage in Berlin. Their mother was able to visit a few times, and every time she made sure to remind her sons that if they were ever faced with a threat, they had to run. This picture was taken during one of her visits and is the last picture ever taken with all 3 sons alive. Late in August of 1943, danger arrived. The Gestapo had completely surrounded the orphanage, ready to transport all the children to different concentration camps where most would meet their death. Paul and his brothers came together in order to decide their plan. Both Paul and his eldest brother, Jacob, knew they had no choice except to run. However, Herman, a rule follower, insisted on following German law, forcing Paul and Jacob to leave him behind. Herman would later die in the concentration camp of Auschwitz. This chilling photo is of a Nazi document sealing young Herman's fate. Paul and Jacob were able to escape the orphanage through the back staircase, and through all the chaos, they went unnoticed. They ran through the dark for 30 minutes to find their mother at the clinic. Somehow they were able to find the building, even though they had never been there before. That night marked the beginning of Paul's underground life and was the beginning of an even greater set of challenges and evils. Many Jews took to a very dangerous underground life throughout Europe. The Nazis were moving throughout the continent towards their goal of killing all the Jews and taking over the world. Throughout the rest of the war, Paul, Jacob, and Fanny lived their underground life. They illegally removed their yellow Jewish stars that they had been required to wear and pretended to be non-Jewish Germans who had been displaced due to the frequent bombing. The family did not stay together throughout the rest of the war, but hid in various locations, such as train stations like this one. One event that left an impact on my grandpa was during his hiding in an apartment in Berlin with other Jews. He was the only member of his family in the apartment at the time, and the Gestapo had arrived to round everyone up. Thinking fast, Paul went into the bathroom and noticed a metal tub high on a ledge. He quickly climbed up to it and hid underneath it. Paul remained hidden until he was sure the building was empty. He then proceeded to climb down and found the door sealed, as the Gestapo did after leaving a building vacant. If it had not been for Paul's quick thinking, he would have been arrested along with the rest of the Jews. For the rest of the war, my grandpa stayed with the Lobel family. First, they hid in an apartment in Karlsruhe owned by a non-Jewish family. With time, the Lobels became suspicious of that family's actions, and they were fearful that they would be turned over to the Gestapo. So they next moved to an apartment owned by Otto Herner and his family. My grandpa Paul described Otto as a non-Jewish angel. Otto Herner owned an acre of land with a small barn located on the property. Due to the land's remote location, Paul and the Lobel family next moved to this barn where they would remain until they were liberated by the American soldiers. Paul's brother Jacob and mother were hiding separately in another town. When his mother learned that Paul had moved, she arranged for Jacob to join him. The conditions were terrible. Paul, Jacob, and the other Jews lived with freezing temperatures in an uninsulated barn that they shared with a variety of rodents. By this time, my grandfather was 13. Since he was the smallest and least suspicious, he had to fetch the food, a dangerous task. This picture was taken after the war in Germany and is of the barn that Paul, along with the other Jews, lived in. After 7 long years living with the fear and the unknown of whether there would be a tomorrow, my grandpa Paul and his family were liberated and reunited. His mother was hiding in a U.S.-occupied zone and was liberated first. She then went with a rabbi and 2 other Jewish soldiers on a jeep in search of her sons. In time, the rabbi and the 2 soldiers found Paul and Jacob in the barn in Edlingen. The 3 remaining members of the family were reunited at last, yet so much of who they were had been destroyed. This is Rabbi Hasselhorn, the U.S. chaplain who took the 2 other soldiers to find Paul and Jacob. This is a picture taken after the family was together and now free. Even though they were technically free, my grandfather's family, along with the surviving Jews, were left in a country that was uncomfortable and not home. In the picture, you can also see a dog. My grandpa was given this dog, whom he named Seppel, in order to give him something to care for and learn how to love again. He was given this dog by Captain Albert Hutler, a Jewish American Army captain who'd play a huge role in getting the family back on their feet. Together, the rabbi and Captain Hutler rented a small apartment for Paul's family where they began their new, free life. Captain Hutler became a father figure to Paul. Paul, now age 14, was once again living with the remainder of his family, only his mother and brother. Captain Hutler found my grandpa, Paul, a job working for the American Red Cross in Germany. For his job, Paul filled 30-gallon barrels with scalding hot coffee that he brewed. Looking back, he realized that this task was actually very dangerous. The next step for my grandpa and his family was to leave Germany and begin their new American life. Captain Hutler helped with arranging the proper paperwork and money that was required for the family to make it to the United States. By September 1946, everything had been arranged for the family's journey. That month, a military ship, the Marine Marlin, left Germany with Paul and his family aboard. It was a 10-day journey, and Paul was seasick the entire time. Hammocks served as beds for those aboard the ship. In time, the ship passed the Statue of Liberty, which for Paul represented freedom and pride. He and his family came to the port of Ellis Island. After 8 years of no schooling in Germany, Paul was able to begin his education in his new temporary home of Chicago. Schooling was not easy as he did not speak English and found himself very far behind academically. Later, Paul moved to San Diego with Captain Hutler and his family. A year later, Paul's mother and brother also moved to San Diego, and the Schauder family was reunited. My grandpa attended and graduated from San Diego High School in 1956. He continues his education at San Diego State University, where he earned a degree in accounting in 1960. During Paul's college years, he worked in a Jewish bakery at night in downtown San Diego to earn money for his family. Paul then worked with his mother Fanny to start a chicken farm, and together they sold eggs. Paul would later work his farm with his wife and children for many years. Even later, Paul opened a liquor store with his family. Paul proposed to Joan, who was his wife of 56 years, in the home of Max and Rose Schindler, who were also Holocaust survivors of Auschwitz. In 1962, Paul and Joan were married in San Diego. One of the rabbis who married them was Rabbi Hazelborn, the very man who helped to reunite Paul and Jacob with their mother Fanny years before in Germany. Paul's best man was Captain Albert Hutler, who continued to be an important figure in Paul's life. Paul and Joan had 3 adult children together: Margot, Mark, my father, named for Paul's father Marcus, and Yael, and they became proud grandparents as well. Sadly, my grandpa recently passed away on January 19, 2019, at the age of 87 after a brave battle with cancer. To sum up, this strong, humble man that I've shared about today was my grandpa, and his story helped to shape the person that I am today. If there's anything I hope I accomplished, it would be for each and every one of you to be more aware and embrace each other's differences. Don't just sit in the back and let someone tell you something that you don't believe is right. Stick up for each other and the right thing. I want to share a well-known quote by Martin Niemöller, a pastor who spoke out against the Nazis during the Holocaust. I find this to be very powerful and still relevant today. It reads, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." I turn to you as a superintendent and board members of the Poway Unified School District to help me share this important message to every student. I invite you to get in contact with me so we can work to make change in our community and create a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Talia, I just want to say I couldn't be more proud of you. I know I said that in front of 4,000 people, but I want to first thank you for coming here and sharing your presentation with us. I appreciate and applaud your leadership and your courage to go and speak this to all the kids throughout Poway and throughout the county. I get teary-eyed because I'm watching your grandmother behind you. I'm assuming that's your grandmother. You get teary-eyed, and your parents are so proud, and you can tell, and they should be, because it takes a very special person to come out and share their story and speak on behalf of what's right, and I appreciate that. And I just want you to know how proud I am that you are a student here in Poway Unified.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.